That's okay, yeah. At least it wasn't the big motion from the last week. I had to repeat that.
Anybody got rules?
No,
No. I'll ask that question because then,
right,
Murphy's
you
Law.
can't have goals.
Murphy's Law will be,
Just when I'm sitting close,
sure,
in close quarters, and who knows what tomorrow brings.
100%.
I'm recording.
Okay, we have a motion moved by member Foisey, seconded by member Paquette, that the special meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee be opened at 5:10 PM. All in favor? That is carried. We have one item for business tonight. That's the continued discussion for the decision-making, read the proposed draft housekeeping zoning bylaw for item 7A of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting held on Tuesday, the 3rd of December at 6 PM. So I am going to turn it over to our planning administrator, and I'm gonna ask for a couple of things from you, because there's a lot of information that's been shared. If you could, I'd like just a summary of information we've received from our planners, Jail Richards.
Yeah.
A summary of the information we've received from the North Bay Manitoba Conservation Authority. And then when time permits, we're actually gonna review a chart that member Langlois actually I think put the bones together and used populated today, so we can take a look and have a bit of a discussion on that. And maybe that'll help guide our conversation as to where we're gonna go from here. Sorry, Sandra, just before I turn it over, I will just we had been having discussions as a planning advisory committee, seeing if we could get across the finish line to get this passed in the time to make it for the town hall meeting that the municipality is holding in late January. If we can't get past that finish line tonight, that's fine. It just won't make it to the members. To the town hall. Thank you. We'll just do a public consultation as we normally would in a council meeting. So that's where we sit now. Hopefully, with any luck, we're going to be able to get it across the finish line, and it's a great opportunity for public consultation in the town hall. So, but if we can't, it's, yeah.
Why couldn't you extend the town hall when it hasn't been out yet, or a date?
Well, it's coordinated with council and council schedulers, and because it takes a bit of time to make sure that all of council is available, and yeah, so that's the initial response. It's not an unmovable feat, but I mean, this is just one item as well that is in a litany of things that we will be discussing that night. So I don't know that council would be of the mind to delay the town hall for one item where there is a full agenda of other things. They would just say, no problem, we'll just use our typical public consultation. Yeah.
I hadn't seen a date set for that, or it be on your agenda.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, one of the first things the CIO has to do is canvass enough of council to be able to make it meaningful. So I think that's where that initial conversation was about trying to pick a date. So
Yeah, some of that has to do with notice periods. So there are some things that we have to give as a notice to the public. So we have to pick a date. So this bylaw, if we moved it to that town hall, requires a notice out by January 10th. If we're not putting it on there, then the date can be more flexible, but I think we still kind of earmarked it for the end of January. As much as possible to kind of mash with all of other council priorities.
So what you're saying is if we can't come together with this tonight, then it will be discussed in council, or it's going to be discussed in the town hall?
it won't be discussed in the town hall. It will go through a public consultation as any other bylaw typically would. It would just happen at likely, as we normally do it, within the council chambers. And it would just be a typical public consultation as we would do.
So the public can come in and speak
Yeah,
on it.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Just, I know I've been pushing as a chair in hopes of trying to get this, because this is an interesting thing to bring forward at a town hall, and
Sometimes it's too much, though. If
Yeah,
you
and
bring
that's
the
fair.
whole- You just said there's a full agenda.
there is quite a bit that we would like to discuss. So again, I mean, I know I've been pushing, but if we don't meet it, it's like, I'm not looking to push a process here outside of anybody's comfort zone. But I thought, let's keep the meeting tonight, and if by any miracle we all come to agree and we're ready to pass it forward to council, then council can get it past first and second reading. Then the public notice consultation, or the public notice can be put out for the consultation period, which the town hall would fall within. And then we can meet it, and that'd be great. If not, it'll just push to later in the new year that this comes back to council, so.
Because we never really put up a time frame of together, like, not all of us knew the plan, I guess.
Well, I mean, I detailed it out in an email to
Yeah.
the committee with dates
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, but we didn't know that, it was gonna be done by special meetings and that sort of, so not like our normal council meeting where it's in the agenda, the bylaws with it, the people can ask to be a delegate, or they can do an email to you to ask a question.
Right,
So, I'm not really sure of,
so the committee operates
Process.
differently than a council meeting when it comes to
Yeah.
public, engaging in the process. This is the heavy lifting of the committee. Obviously wanting to make sure that people that want to be engaged are able to watch, they can contact any of us. If they want to come in and have a seat, they're more than welcome to sit in the venue as well. Unfortunately, break our hearts, nobody has wanted to come and sit with us throughout this, but that is absolutely all the process.
no,
The
no, we're just
only,
talking about the normal council.
Oh.
A council meeting, I wasn't talking, I know this is a working
right,
committee.
yeah,
I was just talking how we usually would see it, we would see a council meeting.
yes,
And you would see the agenda, you would see the draft bylaw.
yeah,
And then people have until the Monday afternoon to ask a question.
Yep.
Or to be a delegate.
Yep. And all of that would, like, if we pass this tonight, all of that still happens at the council level. This does not circumvent council's process of passing first and second reading, having it on the agenda, having it on the website for review, like all of that still transpires. That comes after. If we don't pass it out of committee, the council can't do any of that. We have to pass it out of the committee and then all that can start unfolding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any say, it wasn't about that, it was just about the timeframes of where you want it to go to council.
Yeah.
And do a special meeting.
No, there's no special meeting of council. It would just be a regular.
No,
council
you
meeting.
have mentioned next week
Oh,
would be a
sorry, yes.
special meeting.
I'm sorry, yes, you're right.
So, I mean, in my comments, it had nothing to do with timing or a time frame or anything like that in my comments. It was just about, I was just asking questions. And so then at the special meeting, what was your intent then? So you called a special meeting.
Of council,
If it
Yeah.
was passed tonight,
Yeah.
you called a special meeting of council.
correct.
When would people see the bylaw?
It would, well,
The
the
draft
regular
bylaw.
process would follow as though it's a regular council meeting, so.
For the special meeting?
Yeah, so the same timeframes follow and are applicable, and I'll leave
Yeah.
the CIO to get it exactly right, but.
Right, so the agenda would still go out on Friday. We're trying to still get a Tuesday meeting. I think that's what my email was. So we would have the agenda out by Friday. It's still on the website. It's the full agenda package because it's a council meeting. And we were also going to couple that with also providing council the draft strategic plan. So they would have 2 draft documents to review, and then we were going to have another special meeting so that they can make comment on the bylaw so that they could give the bylaw, and that would have been the second week of January, and we would have to give notice out to the public by January 10th. So there's still 2 more council meetings after, well, if there's a special meeting. If you get to a point where the committee is comfortable with the discussions today, then it can go to council. And then council has to have time to review it and also bring
Yeah.
comments, so.
So at the council meeting, where we review it in council. So that's where we would do the first and second reading.
Mhm,
The third reading would come after public consultation.
Correct.
mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
But
Which may or may not, like, there's gonna be public consultation regardless, there has to be.
Mhm.
It's whether or not we make it a time frame that will include the town hall meeting or not. And regardless, even if it's not at the town hall meeting, we'll do a public consultation just on this bylaw within the council chambers, for sure.
The main part is we're comfortable and you
Yeah.
can't move forward just to, we would just have to adjust dates.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, if we don't pass the finish line tonight, we just, it just won't go to council in time for the public, town hall. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with town hall tonight, for the town hall. It would revert to our normal process, which normally we don't have town hall meetings every bylaw. It was just an opportunity that if we could, we'll get it in front of the public that way, and if we can't, then, you know, it is what it is, and we'll just revert to our normal.
Well, the town hall, you can still bring it forward. Hey, look, we're having a
Yeah.
consultation.
So there's,
You could-
I couldn't not until council saw the bylaw.
No, well, that's right, but the
Yeah, so I
town hall
can't bring it to the town
meeting
hall.
isn't till the end of the January.
Right, if we had council comment on it, then I could, but they have to give first and second reading before I can bring it to the public.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you're saying if it's the end of January,
Yes, yeah, so I'm saying if everything aligns, then it could potentially,
you could do a
Go.
little,
a plug for.
a
that.
plug for it.
Sure, we could, yeah.
Yeah,
I could do a
Yeah.
plug for the public consultation meeting,
yeah.
but we
Yeah.
couldn't talk about it that night.
Mhm.
No, yeah, we can say there's a public consultation for zone, bylaw, housekeeping bylaw. On
Yeah, and then
whatever.
still do, you still have to do your 21-day
What?
Yeah,
period.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, it was just if this town hall is anything like the last one, it was a fairly big audience, it was just an opportunity to put it in front
mhm.
of. Like a bunch of eyes and have great comment and discussion, but. Yeah, there's only so much we can do, so. Okay, so.
Yep.
I think I asked you for a few things 20 minutes ago, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Glad to, clarify some questions there.
Yeah.
So first of all, to say it's been really positive overall. I feel like there's been a strong sense of collaboration in this plan advisory committee. So thank you everybody again for your contributions. So in terms of the questions, this is a follow-on conversation from the last meeting we had last week. And there was two particular points that we were asked to go away and address. So one was related to the potential or non-potential, if you like, for additional dwelling units in the residential limited services zone, which largely falls to the north of the townships, where a series of lakes were already understood to be at capacity prior to 2012, but that was reinforced in a series of reports that have been produced by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority over time, including a 2017 watershed study. So we did go to the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority and just tried to seek, do you have any more updated evidence or data that you can share with us? And although no further reports have been done at this time, it is in the work plan for them to do it at some stage. But given the previous reports and that there's been more development that's occurred since those lakes were determined to be at capacity, their advice basically is to caution against further development in that area. So they've spoken, just trying to see if I can quote them directly. So to quote, this is the final paragraph. The studies indicate that lake areas north of Highway 17 are already at land use capacity for additional dwelling units. In order to maintain the health of the watershed, the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority would not recommend or consider any further development near these lakes. Additionally, much of the area is within a provincial park. So that was the perspective there. So it's a no for more development, pending further assessments to determine what the lake health and water quality is at this time. The second bit was really to kind of look at the draft provisions that we produced in the previous bylaw. So to get some feedback from the consultants that we've been using as part of our overall official plan review and comprehensive zoning bylaw review. So JL Richards were provided with a copy, and they did come back with some track changes and suggestions, which is kind of along their line of thinking of where we should be going, and based upon prior conversations of what we see or my predecessors may have seen of the strategic priorities of the township. So again, they were advising against any further development, intensive development, let's say, in the residential limited services area. And they did provide further commentary regarding some of the lot coverage and maximum size thresholds that we talked about the last meeting, because we need to strike a balance effectively between what percentage in size area the ADU would be in relation to the primary dwelling unit, and how does that relate to overall lot coverage for different zones? So they actually came back with much tighter kind of provisions than we had envisaged. So they were saying that for lot coverage in the rural zone, they would be broken down into 3 different components. So lots less than 1 hectare would have a maximum lot coverage of 15%. Lots of 1 hectare or greater, but less than 5 hectares would have a maximum of 10%. And lots of 5 hectares or greater would have a maximum of 5%. So Nikki and Mike and myself, the chief building official, and myself, we sat down and we looked at this, and we, really tried to balance what we've been hearing from the pack. That, not to be too restrictive around development. So we figured for this point at least, that we would increase the latter 2 to 15%. So our proposal, as we put forward here, was that in the rural area, lot coverage would be allowed to cover up to 15% in the whole of the rural zone. So really, that's the basis of the further edits and changes that were meant and then circulated to the committee on Friday afternoon, and here we are.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess out of the 2 components, let's perhaps start with the RLS recommendations from the Conservation Authority. I'm gonna ask for one clarity question and then I'll open it up there. So they're not recommending additional units. So if they look at the existing lots that are all there,
Yeah,
they could all be developed. They took that into account when they did their initial assessment of lake health and said, if all of the lots that are currently existing on that lake are developed, that's where it's at.
yeah.
Is it fair to assume what they're talking about is they anticipated 1 and not potentially 3
Absolutely.
units on?
It wasn't even on the radar at the time,
Right.
so yeah. So any vacant lots that are there at the moment that are being assessed as being residential vacant land, I'd have to check whether they did it on average household size or exactly, but each lot would be different, remember, in terms of its configuration, the setbacks, what its overall impact would be on the lake, and that is the key to all of this. But in principle, yes, vacant lots that are currently allocated for residential development but don't have any residence on it could still achieve that residence. What we're saying is that you wouldn't, regardless of any of those undeveloped lots or the existing lots that are there, that there'd be no additional dwelling units proposed.
Right.
So, and this, are we saying this is an entire lake because you have unorganized townships there and you have us as Blackfield? And then when they come up with this, with a response, I guess, someone contacted them, this is their response. Is this something official out there that now the development on Lake Talon is this is official?
Yeah,
I
And
believe it's the
that's for
same
all of
language.
them, all of like there, you have Phelps Township, right?
Mhm.
You have Calvin.
Right.
On Lake
I know,
Talon,
right? Yeah.
Phelps Township. And Bonneville.
So the North Bay Mineral Conservation does the study, right? So the municipalities are the keepers of the lake. We're here to make sure that the lakes stay healthy. So we put the policies in the official plan and in the zoning bylaw that keep the lakes healthy for municipalities. For those unorganized, so Calvin would also be subject to the same policies or very similar policies. And the unorganized are done through, I believe it's the Ministry of Northern Development Mines. It may have switched to ministries under the last shuffle, I'm not sure, but so they're done through a different ministry. But the whole lake is assessed. It's not just assessed on Bonneville, so it is assessed on the whole lake. So whatever lands are in those other communities, then they've been factored in as well for development.
Okay, and having said that, that's fair. That all of the municipalities are included in that.
Mhm.
And not just us, that's setting up a bylaw for a portion of the lake.
Right.
And that's why I'm wondering is this something that's official to all of the municipalities on Lake Talon.
I've never read the policies from or Phelps or Ulrich, so I'm not aware what they have in their policies or in Calvin. I just
Not
know.
likely, it's maybe the Lakewood under the Conservation
Yeah.
Authority, but.
Or the ministry would still do the consents.
It's Potter, eh? Which township is it that's abutting Bonfield?
Phelps,
Phelps.
Yeah.
That's
And
Redbridge too on the other side,
Yeah.
right?
far end of the lake.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So the ministry still does consents for them. So they look after all the planning for them.
and Calvin.
Would be
is
Calvin
Just
for-
on the right hand
So-
side down there.
So I think to your point, if Calvin was to ask for this, they would receive the exact same thing, the exact. Recommendation or direction from North Bay Manawha Conservation Authority. So they would receive the same and have the same expectations on the lake that we have.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
so
that
equitable and fair. is
That
what-
wouldn't
Yeah,
be fair, that it would
Right.
be, everybody would be under
Yeah.
the same restrictions.
yeah,
I think we have to first determine if their recommendation is based on the entire lake or is it based on the special zones? Because only the special zones have at capacity, if I'm not wrong, right? Because there's certain portions of the lake, maybe not even in our township, but they're not calling it the entire lake. They're calling it, this portion of this lake or this portion of this lake. Am I reading it wrong? Or is it basically all the waterfront properties? Is it all the waterfront properties on Nospensing, all the waterfront properties on Talon are at capacity?
Yeah.
Correct.
Not the sponsing, but Lake Talon and Turtle Lake here and.
So
when
all
time-
the-
yeah,
all the waterfront properties on Lake Talon in our municipality are at capacity.
yeah,
Yes.
because it's a
Okay.
assessment of the lake health itself. It
Okay,
was.
so then if they're dealing with that, that's one thing. The recommendation means very little to me in terms of development, because if you read it further, they're suggesting a couple things. They're suggesting that first of all, vacant lots, you can still they took into account during their 2017 studies that if you put a dwelling unit on each vacant lot, they didn't restrict the size of it. So number one, we have a lot to the debate here because you can put a brand new house with 6 washrooms in it off the bat, as long as they meet the requirements for the septic and the well and all that, and you can put it in their 300-meter, offset from the lake, and you can put, an apartment in it, right? So there you go. Now we have to say, well, we have to figure out a different wording because we have to allow an apartment building in this dwelling unit because first of all, we have to issue a building permit for this vacant lot. And if they decide to put an apartment in the basement, we have to allow it. As long as they meet the septic requirements. That's number one. I believe that to be pretty accurate. Number two is in their email, they state that this applies to all of the North Bay Manawha Conservation, NBAC, whatever, I'm stumbling here, but NBMACA is 300 meters from the watershed. Now, if you look at lot per, like per lot, there's lots that actually go past that. So you can have the first 300 meters is at the watershed, and then you can have another 300, 800, 900 meters of property that is within our township that does not belong to the watershed enforcement area. So as long as that lot, which we have deemed at capacity, has portions of the lot that are beyond the 300 meters, they should be allowed to put an additional dwelling unit if they have approval for septic and well. So North Bay Manawha Conservation Authority, they're only looking at their 300-meter buffer, and they're only looking at, their own studies. They're not looking at what's beyond that. And it's up to us as a municipality to say, okay, we agree with you, that you have this buffer here, and we want to keep the lakes healthy, but at the same time, there has to be some kind of middle ground to state that we should be able to develop these vacant lots. Because again, they did a study, but their study didn't tell them if this septic on a vacant lot is going to be to accommodate 2 fixtures, 6 fixtures, or 8 fixtures. And it's up to us to determine, you know what, if they do another study and say, fine, each vacant lot can do up to 3 washrooms along with 2 kitchens and whatnot, then we should permit within that 300-meter zone a new dwelling unit with at least 1 attached dwelling unit or detached dwelling unit. Right?
I think, Cam, I think it's a fair question on the 300-meter buffer. Like I don't know if Simon or Nikki will have any intelligence on that or not. And then the other question I would have is, I could only imagine that the Conservation Authority had an average number of bathrooms. Like they would have factored something in when doing an at capacity, right? So sure, you might have some that have 6 bathrooms and 2 kitchens. You'll also have some that have 1 or 2 bathrooms and 1 kitchen. So they probably have an average out, and I'm sure that's information that is probably in the study, actually, if we got into the details as to what they averaged it out on, so.
Yep, I can certainly do a search for that and ask them what the methodology was. Sure.
And what was like, because we don't have a copy of, you know, what you asked them. Like what, I guess because there's the Ontario government is promoting ADUs. So did the township present it as a negative, that it's something that we didn't want?
Not
No.
at all.
Oh,
No.
because
The
sometimes
regulations primarily apply to urban areas, and so we are a rural township, so
Yeah.
we're not obliged to provide at the level of urban areas are, but we're choosing to do so
Mhm.
to meet our to provide housing for people, because it's important for the township and its growth and affordability and all these factors, so we don't have to necessarily.
Yeah.
And this is a positive for our
Yeah.
community. Absolutely. So, yeah.
I think it's important that we as a committee remember that ADUs are currently not permitted within our township. So what we're trying to do in this bylaw is actually allow ADUs within our township. So we're trying to do
Yeah.
it thoughtfully and respectfully and within parameters, but this is taking it from currently not allowed to loosening it to say,
No,
okay, how do you
but
make
we
it valid?
already had secondary dwellings. So, I mean, I'm thinking of ADUs and secondary, pretty much one and the same.
Attached ADUs, you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, there didn't seem to be anything in his comment back to you, or any material or questions that I don't know what you've asked them. About making some concessions, like what could we do to make it allowable for certain ADUs or secondary dwellings?
Well, it goes back to septics and capacity and lake health, and they have authority and jurisdiction over that land, over providing the permits. So even if, and I was kind of mentioning this previously, but even if we were as positive as possible and saying ADUs everywhere, they still have authority over whether they issue a septic permit or not.
Yes, and I know when I called and I just asked general, and I didn't, I just asked on the lake, had anything changed? They said no, that as long as you met the conditions of putting of a septic, then nothing had changed. And this is the person who did the regulations. So what changed in the phone call within a couple of days?
It depends
what
on which,
changed-
so we went through 3 different people at the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. So the first 2 were with the septic program. So if you spoke to someone with the septic program, then the septic program only deals with receiving the application for the septic and then applying that to the setbacks that you need in order to issue a septic. So the septic people do not talk to the planning people when they get an application. So then the planning people at the North Bay Conservation, who we later spoke to, and that's who gave us the review here, then they, you know, because they do the reviews. of the lake. They don't talk to the septic, so they're two different entities. So the planning that we spoke to, who do the studies on the capacity and the health of the lake, they're the ones who are telling us that we should not have more further development within the lake.
As they did prior to 2012, before even the
Yeah.
current zoning bylaw,
Yeah.
because it's already written in there, and again in 2017. So this is not new. This has been
Yeah,
consistent.
it's not new. It's
But
just
the-
that ADUs are a new concept. We don't allow them at all right now, but where can we allow them?
The thing is, we still have not addressed what RLS zones currently have, and it doesn't seem to appear there was that discussion, because why was North Bay Mattawa still giving out septic permits?
They can absolutely still issue septic.
You
can build a brand new
Why
house.
aren't we giving a building permit? Like, say, if everything's fits with the building, you know, with Mike.
So right
Right.
now,
Like it's not making sense to me.
so right now, if you have a vacant land and you want to build a house, then you submit your application to the CB or to the North Bay Mattawa Conservation for the septic.
Yeah.
You submit the building permit application.
After the septic, you have to have septic.
Sometimes you
approval.
do them together, so the review on the building can start, because we try to be as efficient as we can with that. Then the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority provides the approval of the septic to our CBO, and then he can issue a
Yeah.
permit. So he can't issue a permit until then.
That's right.
Part of the building, the building permit review is also a planning review. So then our planning administrator looks at the building permit to make sure that it meets all the other conditions in our zoning, in our official plan, and he has to sign off on it. So that's where our current zoning and our current official plan say those two lakes are at capacity. And so we would allow one single family dwelling or a single family dwelling with a secondary dwelling. Because it has to be attached at one side.
Yeah.
So if somebody came right now and said, I want to put a garage with an apartment above it, that we would not issue a permit for that. Because that doesn't meet our current zoning.
Mhm.
Right.
But I'm talking in the current capacity that we have right now.
Yes.
And that scenario wasn't discussed. So why would we block anything if North Bay Mattawa Conservation was fine with it? Why would we?
Well, it still
They
has
did-
to meet planning.
I know, but our planning,
Yes.
well, our planning was, we were gonna permit it.
Not in the
Cool.
ADU, well, like, we would permit the building because it was already designated. From the lake capacity, they're assuming that all of these lots will eventually be developed.
Yeah.
So then and then, of course, if the secondary dwelling,
Yeah.
which is attached or in the basement or whatever, allowable, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't stop that.
No. But if somebody came with a consent application, we would not approve the consent application.
Are you talking about, what do you mean by?
If somebody, a severance. So if somebody
Okay,
came for
yeah.
a severance along the lake, we would say no to that, because our bylaws are to protect the capacity and the health of the lake for everyone who is currently there.
Yeah,
so
we're
we
not
wouldn't
talking about
approve.
severing anything.
Right,
Yeah.
but the point of not having and not approving the consent is that we don't want to overdevelop the lake. So
Yeah,
I think what they're coming back with their comment is 3 units, a single family, attached and a detached would be overstraining the lake. I think that's North Bay Mattawa Conservation's opinion, is that the lake is at capacity. We'd be overdeveloping on that lake if we allowed ADUs on the lake.
So their concern is we would go, let's say there's 10 lots. It could potentially be 20, I'm sure that there's a mathematical equation that would say that it wouldn't end up being 20, because it would be out of the 10, there would be the primary dwelling plus the attached. If we go to the ADUs, what it's saying is it would now be 30. Instead of the potentially 20,
Yes.
it's now potentially 30,
Yes,
which is the concerning part for.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
I'm not an expert in this, I'm just trying to surmise what I'm understanding in what I'm reading, but.
right.
and
Yeah.
maybe that's so far off because everything is individual. So even with our ADUs, no matter where they are, it's somewhere, it's not gonna be so easy as we think to do one, because you have to meet all the
Setbacks.
requirements, setbacks.
Sure.
So there might be two allowable out of the 30, because, but we're just saying, why not do the process, like,
Yeah, I guess the question, because we have to govern for all of the 10 lots. We can't say these 3 are okay to put 3 on and these 7 aren't, because then we're gonna get ourselves in all kinds of hot
Yeah.
water. We're gonna make these 7, well, we would just get sued, honestly. Yeah.
no, but you can't, you can put it over the whole thing. It's just like there's gonna be some lots in the rural that just aren't going to meet maybe setbacks, or their existing septic, and so they don't wanna put in an additional septic. Like, there's so many variances
Mhm.
with an ADU. There's so many variances.
But they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about lake health, where our job is to worry about lake health, is the conservation authority's job is to worry about lake health, and they pass that to us to be the shepherds of, right? So
Right.
No.
that's the one piece where I'm just trying to reconcile, if, just go back to my rudimentary math. Going from potentially 20 to potentially 30 is what we're being cautioned against from our planners and from conservation authority, right? So.
Yeah, it's quite clear. It says here again, the North Bay Magical Conservation Authority would not recommend or consider any further development near these lakes.
Yeah, they're saying we're not recommended. They're not saying that.
Consider.
Or consider.
Yeah, but okay, then, what happens to the present?
I understand your frustration, but it
It's
sounds
not
like it's
frustration.
non-starter.
It's not frustration. That's being, confused. It's just, finding out the information, and if North Bay Mattawa Conservation is aware that we presently had secondary dwellings, like what happens to all of that?
Well,
What
we checked after the last meeting, we did change it back to keep in secondary dwelling
Mhm.
suites as part of the RLS. So we propose not to change that, so nothing will change, it's not gonna get better or worse in terms of the current development capacity.
But
It's
if
gonna
you're
stay the
saying
same.
that, you just read what they said.
No, but those were done on the calculations, as we understand it, so yes, we can go back and clarify about the fixtures and was that accounted for, but so long as if they said 6, 10 fixtures and there's already 6 in one, and you can do an addition or you convert a basement, then there's room within that existing dwelling and septic system to accommodate that. But there's no additional standalone detached ADUs. We're not gonna allow that.
So in that, he's specifically speaking about detached ADUs.
He's talking about all development there, which is stronger than what I've just said. So again, we're trying to work with the pack to work with the rules that we've got. So we're proposing no change to it at this stage for the RLS. We're not proposing to tighten it up, other than to remove the garden suites bit. But that's because it's being removed everywhere because it's a redundant category because nobody has them.
Cam? Oh, sorry, Harry. I was,
Go ahead,
yeah.
Kev.
Cam, did you
Oh,
have?
go ahead. No, go ahead. Let the mayor speak first.
Okay, and I'm going to say this then, and I don't mean it the wrong way when I'm saying it, so just take it as what I say here. With respect to the Conservation Authority, have you received anything official that this is the way it is?
Yeah, because
A letter from them?
well, it's an email, but we can
An
certainly.
email, okay, because I would say it's hard to develop a bylaw and something's not specific there. We're developing our bylaw and we're taking into consideration the lake and conservation authority, and I just want to be sure that when we do this, it's not coming back. Buckfield Township said, no, you can't do this. It's specifically, these are the instructions, or this is the information coming from the Conservation Authority. We develop our bylaw as per this.
And it'll be consistent with other municipalities who are eventually gonna walk down this road, is what you're asking, like. that they would receive the same information and the same recommendations or instructions that to not allow ADUs on the lakefront, if we're all sharing the same lake, that Calvin would have the same restrictions. Because I agree with you, your worship, if I will not be happy if we say no ADUs and then all of a sudden Calvin's putting up a bunch of ADUs on the lake and receiving all that tax assessment because they're all that much, well, don't get me wrong, being good stewards of the lake has its place, I'm not, but to do it at the expense of unjust between municipalities, I would not be happy with either. I think you make a very valid point. As long as the Conservation Authority will provide that same information to Calvin and every other municipality that touches Turtle Lake or, which I don't think anybody, Talon,
So
absolutely, absolutely.
And again, you can still be good stewards. If they, if you put in for a septic application and they have no concerns with it, then what's the issue?
they do have concerns, and that's what they've said here, so they have their.
Oh, no,
calculation.
until they see the septic, the property, just,
Well, they're still required to process any application that they
Yeah.
receive,
yeah.
but the answer might still be no, so.
Well, the answer may be no at any time.
True.
It could be no at any time
Yeah,
until you go through,
if I heard the CIO correctly earlier, is the Conservation Authority doesn't necessarily talk to themselves. So we've got the permits that will get issued, but they have not actually talked to the planning or vice versa, right? So.
Right. Because the planning from North Bay Meadow Conservation goes into our official plan. So we pre-consult when we draft our official plan, and when we draft our zoning bylaw, there's pre-consult with a number of agencies and all the ministries. And they tell us what we are allowed to put in our official plan, and that's what sets out the rules. From the official plan, it goes into our zoning. So the planning from the Conservation Authority puts that information at the zoning bylaw level. It's our job to follow those rules in the zoning bylaw. So the septic application gets processed based on the septic rules. And then our planner looks at the rules for planning, for good land use planning. And that's when we say yes or no.
so you're also saying, go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was just gonna say basically, so this is their recommendation. This is another government agency. And obviously they have a mandate to protect the watershed and all that, but really this should be a case by case. And I echo the mayor's statement that we shouldn't be, the municipality Bonfield shouldn't be the one to say, sorry, but you're out of luck. I think we should put it, and it shouldn't be a blanketed statement. It should be put back towards North Bay and make them work for their government money, because you can go and say, fine, you have the special zone, and if I apply, Gina applies, doesn't matter. If someone applies and the onus is on us to go and talk to the North Bay Conservation Authority and say, listen, this is my lot and it extends, beyond your regulatory zone. Can I get my septic by the road? And if they say, yeah, actually, we don't see you're beyond our regulatory zone, so we don't have an issue with it. Get your septic. Then I can turn around and say, Bonfield, I think we're good. And Bonfield should then turn around and say, okay, well, we don't see a problem if they don't see a problem. I think that's the way that it should go. I don't think we should be the ones to say, we restrict everyone on Talon and and whatever else, Turtle Lake or whatever else we just called, and say that we say no because there's a potential that Conservation Authority, they suggested and they have an issue with it. You know what? Every lot is different. Every family is different. Every politician is different and every agency is different. And if there's a way that someone really wants to do something and it benefits the families in the community, I say we open the doors and we let them do it. Let the government agencies work for their money and sort it out. If there's a small house that someone can tear down, keep the same footprint, rebuild bigger, and put an additional dwelling unit within that lot, and the Mattawa Conservation Authority says, you know what? That's fine, because you actually had an undersized septic before, and if you just make it a lot larger and you still qualify for it, make your secondary apartment for your kids in the basement. I don't want to close the door. That's what my whole thing is. I just don't want, as the mayor said, I don't want the municipality to be the one to say, you're not doing this. Put it back on the Conservation Authority and let them sort it out one by one. They're getting paid a lot of money from us, and and they need to do it one by one. I'm not gonna accept their suggestion as, you know, that's what it is.
And to your point, we're not looking to make any changes to the current zoning provisions within this housekeeping bylaw of last time's conversation. So if we draw a line under it, then it stays as it is until the full comprehensive review comes, and that will be informed by an additional water quality study or whatever we can get out of them working for the money quote.
Cause I can tell you right now, the way that things go, all that crown land across the lake, not crown land, sorry, provincial parkland, at any given time, if that goes to sale and they cookie cut that, we're gonna look like asses by withholding our dwelling units. And then these developers are gonna come in and say, well, look at, we just cookie cut all this and you know what, let's get the money rolling. And then the conservation authorities are like, yeah, let's put some septics in. I mean, the world is, you know,
Listen, I can appreciate, and I'll call it cynicism, but a well-placed cynicism that
Thank
you
you.
have. I can absolutely appreciate that. I guess, you know, if I'm gonna think 15 years ahead, so if I own a lot on Talon Lake and my development plan is in 15 years from now, and ADUs have been allowed, and all of a sudden the water is spectacularly worse because of the first 10 developments did harm because we went from what was going to be 20 to 30. Now all of a sudden, am I further restricted to what I've owned my lot for 25 years? I knew that I was going to be able to build a house. I knew that I was going to be able to build a secondary dwelling. Like, are we potentially setting up for those in the future that the calculation worked for previously, for the calculation not to work for anymore, based on the extra pressure that increased ADUs will have put on that lake? It's honestly a genuine question, because what I need to see is some evidence-based information coming back to the committee that would refute what we're getting from the planners, from the Conservation Authority. These are the experts that we look to work with, and well, we pay J.L. Richards and we pay the Conservation Authority too, but we're forced to work with the Conservation Authority. So it is really difficult to say, yeah, thanks for your input. We understand that it's going to put additional pressure on the lakes, and so be it. Like, that's tough for me when I play it forward in my head about other development in 15, 20 years from now, right?
yeah, but at that point, the buck stops with them, right? If we just say, yeah, we're okay with it, with, let's say, you know, someone applying for an additional dwelling unit in the special zone, it's up to the Conservation Authority to determine if it's doable or not. And so let's leave it with them.
But we already have an
Yeah.
adopted official plan which says that the lakes are at capacity and it dates back to prior to 2012. So they're already seen as being at capacity, and yes, they need to do more studies to determine the current lake health, but they're at capacity, and so there's not much we can do about this at this stage, right?
It was at capacity, you just said, in 2012,
And in 2017.
but it was still allowed. And maybe, because, I mean, I think when you asked them, you put some time pressure on them to get back to us.
They wouldn't put anything in
Yeah.
writing they weren't comfortable
Yeah,
with, and
yeah.
actually they
No.
probably went a bit stronger than I might have expected too, so.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe, because they probably are in the same boat too, when, you know, they're answering right away. Like, you get thinking after the fact of, oh, okay, so what
Their
does
whole
this one-"
remit is to protect the watershed,
Of
so
course.
it's, you know.
Of course
Yeah.
it is.
So is the compromise in the RLS that we continue to allow the secondary dwellings, but we don't allow a detached ADU? Until we have more information, or like till there's another study done on the health, which we know is in their work plan. So if they're going to do another study, and we're still have our zoning, our comprehensive zoning bylaw that we could review this. So for now is the compromise that we continue to allow the secondary dwellings, which mean that one face of it has to touch the existing building, or so there has to be a shared inside. And then look at, when we get that study from the health of the lakes, that we can then assess and have better evidence that it's okay for in 15 years, as you say, that in 15 years, the lake will be fine if we triple the development on the properties.
For me, what's the difference with a little second, if it was a smaller secondary dwelling? Because it could actually be larger than one dwelling. So again, as long as the North Bay Mattawa allowed it, you know, taking into consideration what's the size of the house there? Would they need another septic? What's kind of the difference then? If it was detached?
So if, I'm gonna throw a snag in, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So if we want to go, if you want to recommend that RLS be allowed to have the 3 units, then we'll have to move this into a separate way because we'll also have to do an official plan amendment. Because right now our official plan says that we are at lake capacity and there can be no new development. So we'd have to change those rules in the official plan before we could change them in the zoning.
And that's not the advice that our planners are giving us through the code review of the OP, so
Yeah,
I can't see that being likely, but
yeah.
open-minded. We
Currently,
have
the
seen the evidence to know.
Yeah, we don't have the evidence to.
But our
After
current,
them, but we don't have any evidence that comes back to say, you know, what is the impact in 15 years? Because nobody has done that study to know what it would be.
just to correct I think I want to get a clarification. At capacity doesn't mean that we are not permitting new development. At capacity means that basically we're restricting severances and consents in
Yes.
order to promote new lots for new development. So there's a difference, there's a distinction there, right? Because we have vacant lots, we also have lots that are larger than their neighbors that can potentially accommodate an additional dwelling unit separate with a septic if they're outside the zone of regulation and approved for septic.
For me, I think it's a distinction without difference though. Because we're still tripling the development on the property, potentially. If
No,
you
but-
have a seasonal cottage and then you add in another dwelling unit attached, and then you add in a detached, so your cottage might only be 400 or 600 square feet, and then you're going to add in another dwelling attached, another detached, which I think I can't remember the square footage that we put on those. But so we're still tripling the size of that.
Okay, but
Which is
so-
fine. I think if that's the way that the committee wants to go, you can put that recommendation. It's just not where our experts are saying we should.
So I'm
Well,
wondering if
we
I
don't have
frame-
experts.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, well, I don't agree with that because at capacity, like, I wanna get it cleared out on my table here, right? At capacity is dealing with, we're not doing any more severances. So when I look up at the zoning for, you know, this zone, special zone, I say, okay, I'm permitted to do this, and this. But by the way, at capacity means that we can't sever that lot in two and you can't build, you know, 2 different things. That's what at capacity means. So let's forget about that for a second. You've already made that statement as an official plan. You can't sever, you can't cut it in two and make two lots. Fine. But other than that, we spelled out what you can do. It's when you say it's up to the professionals are the conservation authority. If they say, hey, you have a lot that you can build on, but you're in the zone and you're not going to give you a septic, then done deal. Okay, we walk away. But I don't think it should be us to say, because we've already deemed you at capacity and we don't allow you to sever, in addition to that statement, we're also going to scrutinize you even further and say, as a municipality, we're going to count how many buildings, dwelling units we're allowing. That's where I stopped the conversation. I think we've already determined at capacity means we're not going to provide any more consents. Conversation over. The conservation conversation now starts. That's what I'm saying. I want to split those two up. We're done talking as a municipality in enforcement rules when we've already said at capacity means this, but because we allow, if you look at the special zone, what you can build, it says dwelling units. I don't even know if it says, it probably does say secondary dwelling units.
It does.
Yeah, so that conversation is separate from what at capacity means.
Is it at capacity for dwellings?
No, they interpret the at capacity as being lake health, but based upon, to Cam's point, the number of existing consensus severances and the
okay.
average number of
Because I
fixtures
thought
and
it
the rest
was
of it.
based on the number of dwellings.
Yeah,
Your
the
worship?
capacity piece
Yeah, but-
relates to lake health.
Do they monitor the pump outs on, for the septics on the lakes?
No, we do not. We are, I know for WASI, they do monitor that. They have not put that restriction in. I mean, I think in
they do
15 years
on
we would
Tread
get
Lake
there.
too, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So.
we're not there yet.
Cam, you triggered
Yeah.
something in me, because as I'm trying to sort all this out myself, so. You know, yes, we're saying you can't sever, because what we're trying to do is can't sever to create another development is basically what it's doing. So in my head, now I sit back and go, okay, well, you can't sever, or you can't build an ADU because it's the same result as severing. You're gonna potentially build another development, right? So.
Yes, yes and no. The thing is, with those lots, the way that those lots are sized, you can't really sever because one, you need access to, if you cut it, they're long lots, right? A lot of them are, a lot of lake lots are difficult. So if you sever them, you have to gain access. Now it comes to, you know, shared driveways and all these other things, because you have to give frontage. But the other thing is, lots of these lots are thin and small, and if you do sever, you can't even
Frontage.
fit a new septic. So Matter was like, even if Bonfield says cut that lot in half, we can't help the applicant because they can't fit a septic on there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just come back to the point of, Cam, it might have been you who said, like, every lot's different, every family's different, everything is different. So our job is to try and figure out, you know, when I boil it down in route of entry is, you can't sever because we don't want another development there. So it would make sense, you don't want another ADU because that's just another development. It's no difference between that and severing. Like severing is based on the pressure on the lake. That's why you wouldn't want to sever. So yeah, there's practicality of maybe it's too thin or whatever, but let's pretend that doesn't exist. You would still say you can't sever because you don't want pressure on the lake.
Yeah,
That's,
but a vacant lot, so if I can't build a secondary dwelling unit, I'll just buy my neighbor's lot and put a mansion on it. And you know what? The amount of fixtures and the septic size is gonna be exactly the same, because I'm just gonna oversize the neighbor's lot. Do you know what I mean? Like there's vacant lots that can accommodate a new house, and if they go and just build a mansion with even 12 fixtures versus one additional dwelling unit up the hill that has 2 fixtures, well, which
I mean,
one's
I guess-
worse?
technically, you're right. I think the likelihood of that happening versus somebody building an ADU on an existing lot, if it was permitted, much more attainable to say, I'm gonna build, I don't have to pay for a second lot, I don't have to pay for, you know, so I think, you know, it's much more likely that we would be creating another development through an ADU than it would be buying my neighbor's property and building a mansion, but I technically, yes, that could happen. People could buy every lot there and build 18 mansions for their entire family if they wanted to.
I love when you guys start talking mansions.
Yeah, I need enough money to build a mansion. That'd be
We
great.
need mansions.
Yeah.
Yes. It sounds like we're very divided though, and I don't know, I mean, as staff, I think that we are recommending that they not be in the RLS because that's what our professionals are telling us, and that's what our current official plan and the new official plan and the zoning say. So I think if the committee wants to move forward with recommending RLS be in the bylaw and allow the ADUs, then you could just forward that to make it a council decision. Because this is still just a recommendation, but if this is the committee's recommendation, you can still move it forward that we want to recommend that they be in the RLS.
And your reports and all of it would be forwarded to council, obviously.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But
I
council
would
need to
feel-
know that the Conservation Authority would neither recommend or consider any further development. So it would be a useless zoning requirement anyway.
And I think though, it almost needs to be followed up again with North Bay, Mattawa. Because like you said, you wanna ensure that treatment is for everyone. Like Phelps, Kelvin, And we
We
don't
can
know
certainly
that.
ask that what they use for capacity for the lakes and that I know all the study involves the entire lake. They're not just looking at Bonneville when they do these studies, because they do the watershed studies for all the different lakes that they manage. So it's for the lakes, but we can certainly follow up to make sure that it is
And it's-
equitable.
I think they need a meeting together because they have some people giving out
Yeah.
septic permits.
Boy, I wish that was in our authority.
So, no.
Septic
but-
wouldn't even talk to us.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's an issue there before we can decide in ours.
I don't think, well, if we're waiting for the North Bay Meadow Conservation Authority to talk to each other, which is well outside of our jurisdiction to be able to even suggest that to happen, they're gonna run their business the way they run their business. We're gonna be stalled for a very, very long time. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, what we have is an email and a strongly worded recommendation, which will go forward, like, that'll be part of council's consideration regardless. How council ends up deciding on this was yet to be determined, but I think it's. Yeah,
If you start second guessing the experts,
well,
why ask them?
right, why have. them?
Right.
Well, we're not second guessing them. We don't have a clear that this is for the surrounding area.
What-
The lakes.
It's,
are-
yeah, and what
The
is
lakes.
They're clear.
Township Calvin doing?
Yeah.
Have they did ADUs? and
Well,
what
we
they
can
do.
ask them to forward this email to Calvin at the same time to say, hey, when you start to go down your ADU road. Here, we're preemptively sending you this, like, that's impossible, like Calvin's not even started an ADU to the best of my knowledge.
No, to my knowledge. I mean,
Right.
most of, it's mostly the larger cities that are doing the ADUs. Some of the smaller municipalities, again, we're not. If you have water and sewer, then there were more restrictions from the province. And well, I guess more of an urgency from the province. We're considered rural. So they're like we're not even on their radar. So I'm sure other similar municipalities like
Right.
us are not even on their radar.
But why?
We want to
Why are
be
we-
proactive.
Because we're
Yeah.
trying to be proactive in getting more development within the municipality.
Mhm.
Of course. but-
Affordable and attainable housing.
Yeah.
I think that's
right
important to
locations.
us.
Yes, but, say if someone went to Kelvin and asked for an additional.
Mhm.
Dwelling on Callan.
Mhm.
What are they going to tell them?
I don't believe their current bylaw allows an ADU, and they're not even looking at changing that right now. To
But
the
they
best
could
of
do
my
a committee
knowledge,
of adjustments, they could do correct? For
they could
zoning?
rezone.
Yeah,
Yeah, they could do a zoning
Yeah.
amendment at council.
You would receive the same comment from the North Bay.
Yeah,
Meadow
and that,
Conservation
the zoning amendment still requires consultation with
Yes,
the North
yeah.
Bay Meadow Conservation, so they would still send them the same answers. I don't think North Bay Meadow Conservation will waver on their advice.
because it does affect a lot of properties.
Yeah.
In what we're trying to obtain for, I'm just thinking of some places that they might have a smaller place and their kids are coming to look after them, what happens?
They could
Secondary,
do
secondary.
Secondary
dwelling.
dwelling.
Yeah.
No,
It just
it
has
has to be
attached.
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 Yeah, secondary dwelling.
It is an
Maybe
attached
it
dwelling
can't be.
unit.
Maybe it has to be behind the house and they wanna build a little. 500 square foot. So every one of those people. Of our constituents are cut off.
They currently can't. It's not
Yeah.
that they're cut off, they
Well, they
currently can't.
currently could have had a garden suite if it came down to it.
And they can have a
Additional
secondary
dwelling,
dwelling.
Yeah.
secondary
but
dwelling,
But a garden suite is still only a 20-year building that you can
yeah,
put on
yeah.
your property.
Yes,
So allowing the secondary dwelling is actually a better long-term
no,
solution.
but I'm saying if they couldn't have it in their existing, it has to be in the secondary dwelling,
Yeah.
has to be in the existing.
And that'd still be case by case, because the garden suite still has to be able to hook up to the well and the septic. So you would still have to
Yes.
have those file reviews.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course, but, being an ADU for them would be out of the question, is what I'm saying. If
Right,
it could,
be
if it
detached.
could not be part of the main building. So all of those people that might wanna have their parent there, their child there, whatever.
Can we restrict an ADU in the RLS to one? instead of two.
That's what it does, doesn't it? You,
So you would have a secondary dwelling and
Yeah.
one detached? Or you would
Or-
remove the secondary dwelling?
Secondary dwelling and just do one ADU, whether it's in the
Right.
basement or whether it's 10 feet away from their house.
well,
I don't know.
That's
Mhm.
exactly what I was thinking.
Well, you're brilliant then, Cam.
No, I'm not brilliant.
Okay, you're
I'm just-
brilliant.
Well, you're all brilliant.
Maybe that's the solution. Maybe we're banging our head against here going, I think we all agree that we're not trying to put extra pressure on, like, what we're trying to do is be open to supporting those living on the lake. So if the definition of, hey, listen, I need to be not attached, but it works. There's no difference between that and
I
an
don't see
attached
any.
wall.
Attached or detached?
Yeah,
Just restrict the number of them. So they
Right.
can't be 3, they can only be 2.
there can only be two.
There can only be 2.
That could work. Let's go back to North River.
Yeah. we'll clarify with them.
But only
Okay.
Mhm.
Holy, look at us. I think we got there on a direction that if they. conservation are gonna like this.
Mary,
Pardon?
did you have something else to say? You were.
No,
At one
I
point-
just wanted to say there are large parcels of land on the lake as well. Like farmland on Talon Lake. Where when we say, well, we can't grant it, we won't grant a severance, what about that?
Yeah,
We wouldn't grant accept, we wouldn't grant a consent.
What about if they wanted to sever it to their children or?
It's the same as prime agricultural in the rule. If you have prime agricultural, you can't sever less than 40 acres. You have to have 40-acre
That's
parcels.
not in effect. yet.
No, that's not ours. Yeah. Well, it's in effect in some places. We don't have prime ag in ours.
Ours is waiting.
And this kind of goes to Cam's point about the kind of 300-meter buffer. So if we drew a line under this now, as it is, as we do the full comprehensive review this summer, as that comes forward, then we could look at that. But it would be informed by an up-to-date lake capacity health assessment, which might be tighter, or they might say it's improved because of all this amazing work that people have done, upgrading the septics or doing other, remedial works. We don't know at this stage. It's best to stick as it is and draw a line under that.
So instead of a secondary dwelling, they're allowed one detached ADU.
Or just one
One attached
ADU.
or,
One
but we
or
can
detached.
clarify whether
Or
it would be
contained.
attached or
Or
detached.
contained, but
Yeah.
you can't have a contained and a separate, like
Attached or
it
detached ADU, doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
One ADU.
One ADU.
We'll get their clarification on that, but in principle, I see the point that you're
Yeah.
making. It's not necessarily intensifying the
Yeah.
use too much more.
Okay, I'm gonna poll the committee because I feel like we're almost rowing in the same direction here. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry.
Okay, can we just clarify the points that, so any vacant lots that are,
Already assessed as being vacant residential land by.
yes, state,
Yeah,
And you can build and an ADU.
well, yes, subject to the general
Well,
policy.
yes,
of
I mean,
the-
15%.
Yeah.
yeah, oh, like all the zoning, yes,
Yeah,
all
yes,
the rest of it.
setbacks and.
Yeah, but
and-
also to the general provisions we just mentioned, whether we go
Yes.
with one ADU, whether it has to be attached or detached, but yes.
I don't know what you mean, what else is there, like besides setbacks?
So if we went ahead with what we've just said, that there'd be one ADU, whether it's
Yes.
attached or detached, then yes, a vacant lot, you'd be able to have a primary dwelling plus one ADU. But we're gonna clarify whether that would be attached or detached.
Right, okay, I just didn't know if there was another restriction we're talking about, sorry.
Yeah, and then all the others,
Yes,
about
the
development
zone.
constraint areas, there's many
Lot
factors.
coverage,
Yeah,
yeah, all of. the above, right?
configuration, yeah, like,
That you would normally have.
yeah.
Because that would be the same as a secondary dwelling.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah,
nothing's really changed.
No. You're hooked up to
Certainly
the
if it's
same
attached,
septic,
yeah.
same well.
and if it could be beyond that 300 meters, which is the requirement right now. I don't know if that many lots that meet that. Quite, I feel like we're talking about a handful here, but we can't.
Like, say a vacant lot, if it's just one residential, you still have to be 300 meters from the lake?
300
Because
meters
of
is
the
a
lake
regulated
capacity
area.
issues that were raised in 2012.
Yeah,
But they're giving out septic system permits all the time without that since 2012. Just recently, that you
No.
don't, they don't, require that.
But they might be
And-
factored into those
I
calculations.
know, but what about all the people that, you know, may eventually need to upgrade their septic?
Oh, well, if you upgrade, this is my perspective
Improving
anyway.
improving the system?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't see why that'd be a problem.
And there's
Yeah,
it's
different
better.
systems nowadays that don't
But they
have
would
the
still
same-
make you, if you had a septic that didn't meet the new standards and you were upgrading, you would have to move it to upgrade to the new standards. Kind of like at a house where it's, sort of.
Yeah, but they might not make the new, do that because they might not even have the lot for that.
No,
So when you
absolutely.
do get
We
rid
have-
of the house.
Yeah, we have lots that we would never, we have vacant lots that won't get a septic.
No, I'm.
Or won't get the building, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm talking about, like somebody upgrading, they presently have a house and they don't have the 300 meters
Mhm.
setback. So there must be septic systems that come into play that they can put that they use for a new septic. They're not gonna say, oh, your house is no longer usable.
Gonna be a candidate for a mansion.
No, yeah, you know, they won't,
Well, they,
yeah,
if
that's
you
where it
need
gets
a new
grandfathered,
septic.
yeah, that's where. They would look at what the current is, if it was legal non-conforming.
But I don't see where currently the North Bay, Mattawa, for any new place on a lake is requiring that 300 meters. for a
Sometimes
septic.
it's not the direct distance to the high water mark, sometimes it's the flow. So like, depending on how we can position it, it needs to be that the outflow would not be within 300 meters.
Yeah,
So
and
it
that's
could
up to
loop
the
around.
North Bay, Mattawa to decipher, not us.
Yeah,
Well, we would
Well-
look at it when we got the building permit application, because they would still make sure that they were. If they're not following their own rules, we'll check, we'll be more careful when we get the building permits.
So you are becoming enforcers of North Bay, Mattawa.
We've
If-
always
if
been-
they-
We've always been enforcers.
Two-way street.
Mhm.
yeah. That's what planners do.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to how close we are.
Whether,
I think we're there, so we need to have a conversation about some of the lot coverage piece, which we
Yeah.
can do in very quickly, I think. But is so just a quick poll before we actually call a formal vote. Is the committee comfortable with the idea of recommending to council a bylaw that would include RLS having one ADU?
attached or detached.
Attached or, yeah, it doesn't matter to us,
Okay.
so we're not increasing the pressure on the lake. But we're allowing more flexibility that it doesn't have to have an adjoining wall or be in the building.
I'm up for that.
Okay,
Would you be okay with that?
Yes, but with North Bay, Mattawa, I'd like more clarification on that 300 meter as well.
Sure.
And what is that on what they said that
Yeah, on the buffer,
it
because
has
I mean,
reached
we
the
haven't,
capacity?
So-
even did
Is
that.
that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's a fair question that we can ask staff to, it really is
Yeah.
non-impactful on this
No,
current
but I'm
bylaw,
just
but it's
going
fair,
about it.
yeah, no, it's very
because
fair.
I mean, currently I can think of quite a few houses that are
Well, that's less than ideal.
didn't have the 300 meters, but
Yeah.
North Bay, Mattawa thought it was okay because maybe they had them use a different septic system. Because not everybody has the
Right.
same, my neighbor doesn't have the same
Well,
septic.
It's
as
not
me.
all bedrock.
Yeah,
Different things.
yeah.
Right.
They
Okay,
weren't like, oh, 300,
You don't want it to be just an opinion of one person in the conservation authority.
or else someone
That's why
here
it's
getting
there,
into
like
an
something
argument
specific.
with
It's
an
not-
owner.
Just to clarify, it's not just some arbitrary like
Yeah.
distance that they made up. It's based upon the
Yeah.
lake capacity assessment handbook. So this is like a
Well, this
provincial.
is in our area, so
Look
it's
at
been
slope
quite
and
common.
topography and
Yeah,
vegetation and.
okay, so I'll just focus this back to this
Okay.
bylaw only because of the very fair question, I just don't think it needs to. It won't necessarily impact this bylaw, I don't think. So the other piece that we asked, which you touched on, was the lot coverage.
Yeah,
And it came back more restrictive, so we need to, as a committee, figure out what our comfort level is to recommend to council on lot coverage, so can we? discuss that? Can you just
Yeah.
highlight that one more time for us, Simon?
Yeah, so just to clarify, this was based upon new allowance for accessory dwelling units, recognizing that there'd be more development per se on the lot. That's why there was that intent to reduce down lot coverage, recognizing that we have some huge rural lots here. And even if you had 10-15%, that's a lot of development on some of these large properties. So their recommendation was these different thresholds, if you like, or just find the right page. I believe it was 15% or less than 1 hectare, 10% between 1 hectare and 5 hectares, and 15% for 1 hectare or less. So again, just to emphasize, that was a recommendation from our own planners, which have been doing this in many communities across the province, and we've been working with them on our official review. And we, the staff, recognizing that the PAC might want more, are proposing there be 15% across all rural lots, regardless of size. So 15% would be the lot coverage.
Which is per, like in 2.5 acres, 15%, that's a lot of lot coverage still, like you're building an awful lot of buildings. to Get 15% coverage.
Well, the smaller the lot, the less buildings you have to read
Yeah.
that.
Well, but if the minimum is 15, so 15% on a 10-hectare property.
Yeah,
is-
well, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
lot, but even 15% on 2.5 acres. How many
15%
square
on one.
feet is that? That's huge.
We
I
worked
think
it out.
it should be the other way.
Yeah, but some of those lots, should be maxing out what would be legally termed a dwelling. It would
Right.
become a large building essentially, so there's no restriction really in that sense in terms of
Right,
development potential.
so, any comments on that? Is everybody comfortable with 15% lot coverage on 1 hectare and above?
Yeah,
All rural,
All rural lots, sorry.
because there wouldn't be any less than 1 hectare unless it was a previously grandfathered
Right.
lot.
so so we all know what we're talking about. So that includes your primary, your additional dwelling units, your barn,
Accessory.
all the accessory buildings, even the ones that are below the building permit requirement.
Yeah,
Like if it's-
total lot coverage,
That's all part of it. Carport,
total
Uh,
lot coverage.
covered,
All
standalone covered.
structures, so patios, so like raised decks, they're all
Well, see,
classed
no,
structures,
I don't
right?
know if all municipalities read it the same way. So you include, like North Bay doesn't include a carport that has no foundation. It doesn't, if it's just like a, 4x4 post with a roof on it, is that part of coverage in Bonfield? I don't think North Bay has that because I did a project and they didn't classify that as our coverage. It has to be enclosed and part of a structure, but I'm just trying to get an understanding before we vote on the
Yeah.
percentage. And like, I know, cause like, listen, there's barns, there's pole barns, right? So obviously, like, if you clad it, does it become coverage? If it's not clad, is it,
Yeah, we're just checking the bylaw here, just
So
to,
if
Yeah.
I do the
So-
math correctly, there is 107,639
structures, okay.
square feet in a
Oh,
hectare.
It is covered by building structures.
And
Covered decks.
so 15, if I minus 85% of that, it would be 16,145.85
Yeah.
square
0.7.
feet of coverage. What's that?
I have it on my screen too. I tell you, it's 16145.87 square feet, which
Oh,
is
I
actually.
have 0.85. Are you sure 0.87?
You know why? I'll tell
We'll
you why.
defer to
because
your
I-
0.87.
No, I'll tell you why, Jason, because I converted metric first. So.
Of course you did.
15%, 15% is of a hectare. 15% of a hectare is actually 1,500 square meters. Then from that, 1,500 square meters is 16,145.87 or 85.
0.85. We'll split it 8-6. We're all about compromise here.
Yeah,
So lot coverage in the zoning bylaw means the proportion of the lot area that is covered by buildings, structures, and covered decks excluding parking areas, driveways, patios, and sidewalks. So I think it would include a carport, but not the sidewalk, because it includes a deck too, so.
really a deck. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're comfortable with 16,145.87.
86.
I think I'm good with that.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna throw this out as one last ditch attempt. If the committee is comfortable, oops, sorry.
I was just wondering if there was one more question, before we just finish, like, can I get just, the only reason is I'm trying to know the municipal bylaws and what comes into a section, you know, for those regulations that I asked you about. That's
These are the
possible to get?
questions that you
Okay,
raised
fine.
earlier, yeah?
Yeah, just for, like, it doesn't tell us a bylaw for making a minor housekeeping, like, that's under the municipal act, but I was just asking about
It's under the planning act.
planning act, okay?
Section 34. Section 34 of the
34.
planning act.
Do
You
you
can
know
read that.
the number? Just section 34, it's all
Section, yeah.
contained in section
It's
34?
section 34 is for zoning, yes.
And it makes reference directly, is the 4.1 or, because section 34 is a pretty big portion.
I don't know it off the top of my head right at this minute. No,
Yeah.
I don't know. So we would, it's the
I
same
can-
process for all the
yeah.
zonings, and then we're doing an amendment to the zoning bylaw.
Yes, yes,
So it falls under the amendment section on that, so I'd have to look in the planning act.
yeah, but we can have Simon get back to us just on
I can
those.
look at those questions, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and and then like for our, like you, like for emergency meetings and stuff like that, we're covered under what, the procurement, the procedural bylaw?
Procedure.
Yeah, that's my fine. And just, when you saw the thing on that other one that I was wondering on the township website, is bylaw 2012-49.
yeah, so that was just the bylaw to bring into effect the previous comprehensive zoning bylaw that exists.
Okay, because it's not on, I couldn't find that on the website,
Okay.
because people might
But-
wonder, they're referring to that bylaw at the first.
We have started a website review, so
Yeah.
there might be some documents periodically
Yeah.
being taken down, but we are currently looking to review the whole website.
Before we hurry too much, can we go back to the draft bylaw to see what we're taking out and putting in? On the ADUs, because we didn't really go over those. On the.
For the RLS
ADU.
section?
Well, in the actual bylaw of what's staying and what's going.
I don't think we changed anything.
Well, I don't know, I was just,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think we
nothing.
changed anything in the bylaw.
well, at one point we were taking out something.
So some specific questions that you asked, which was are ADUs not to be
Yeah,
permissible
but I
in
was
the
just wondering
hamlets?
in our bylaw here that,
Yeah,
and because we're approving it, if we're approving it, can we just quickly go through it of what changed?
I think to the best of our recollection,
changed.
nothing's changed, yeah. So I don't
I mean-
recall anything changing, so. It was just a conversation about, we had very specific points that bring forward for this meeting that we've addressed, so.
The the things that we're changing
Yeah.
here, that's. a few things that we-
Okay, but what needs to be changed in the bylaw? Something has to be changed.
So 3.45.3.
Can we go?
Well, I guess it would be actually 0.3. Thou shall be permitted in the following zones, so we would add the RLS zone.
that's the copy that was sent back to us, so she's referring to the copy that was tidied up.
Okay, so I'm not sure. which
So
section that
I'm
is.
going to the last bylaw that you sent us. The last bylaw that you sent us.
By tidied up, I mean,
That
like
was
the paragraph numbers sort of just because it got a bit jumbled, so.
Yeah,
so it made it
this is-
simple.
I want to make sure we're looking at the right bylaw. Because we had about.
So
three of them.
3.45.4, we would add
This-
the RLS zone. It's page 5.
And then we would add additionally. Clause to say that RLS zones are permitted one ADU.
So we don't have the, do you have your, your latest copy? Unfortunately, I don't,
That's the latest coming up, wouldn't you go?
I don't know.
It's not in addition to the
You
secondary dwelling.
printed out this one?
Right. The intention is
that?
very clear
Just
from the
you-
committee.
Yeah,
I thought you
that's
could-
the one I just gave you, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to section. Okay, are we gonna quickly talk about, hunt camps? We were going to 600 or 800, or is that something you're?
6,000 or 8,000 spaces.
Wow, remember 1,000.
Take a 0.
Yeah.
Please and thanks. Yes,
For the hunt camp, that was still a question. Are we
So it's-
deciding
well,
on that number?
That's in there, our draft one is 6 to 800.
Right,
yeah.
that's it, you were the swing vote now, because you weren't here at the last meeting, so do you have a particular opinion about that? 600 or 800?
So it's, you can't exceed that, 6 to 800, yep. And I don't have any problem with that because
They can go lower too
you
if they
can go
want.
lower too. But if you're going to put something there, because the people in the hunt camps are, they just bring all their hunting gear and their wet clothes and their food, and it's not a fancy place, but I think it has to be a roomy place. And then they're not coming back and wanting to put another one on there because they don't have room or that sort of thing. I like the bigger.
800.
To be honest, I am happy to go 800 at this point, but ultimately it would be reviewed again.
And I
Council,
can
so-
even handle the paint on the sea can.
Okay, I like it.
Compromise, it's all
I
about.
did watch the meeting.
It's in there very nicely, so I'll accept that.
Okay, so we're just changing to,
Is that-
okay, so we're gonna go to 3.45.
Point
With
4.
that
You
is
get
changed,
that.
Here, I'll give it to you.
Oh, yes.
I don't need it.
145.4.
3.5, yeah.
People
Oh,
like
yeah.
it.
We are
3.45,
going to
yeah.
3.5,
remove
yeah.
this and put
I
this up
just
here
moved it
and make a
reverse.
clause that they're only allowed
Three,
one.
four, five, two.
I'm using font,
What if I two?
I'm sorry, I was just looking where
Three
Gina's
dwellings.
pointing her finger. Maybe it's someone else.
3.5,
4.4, we would add in the RLS,
That's 1 EDU.
right? And make
Yeah.
a new provision that you would allow one ADU in the
You
RLS.
would take out little 3 III within the recreation limit
Yeah.
service. Take that out. Okay.
Yes,
what number was that one?
the one right below.
3.45.5, the third street, Roman Street. That would be.
John, so you're taking that out?
Well, no, keep it in, but it's good.
Oh, yeah,
take it
yeah,
out.
yeah,
keep it
yeah.
there, but yeah.
And,
There would be a
now,
new sentence to say,
ADUs Now, what do you mean by with any zone which does not permit a permanent dwelling unit?
commercial, industrial, institutional.
Mhm.
We don't
Okay,
allow
so that's
primary,
cottage. A permanent dwelling is a cottage, what's the definition of a permanent dwelling?
Cottage is not a permanent dwelling.
any dwelling. So if you don't allow, we don't allow dwellings in commercial or industrial.
So what are you talking about, you've been talking about, permanent homes
Mhm.
in our existing permanent homes?
Yeah,
Is that out of there because of that statement?
Yeah, if we don't permit a
If you don't like-
house, if we don't permit a house somewhere, you can't have an accessory dwelling if we don't permit a house.
Right, so anything existing would, anything that's used currently as a permanent house. People are living it year round.
Right.
Would be permitted.
As long as at some point it was legal.
Yeah,
Like as long as
And
some
yeah.
point
tax
the
them.
municipality approved what they're living
Yes.
in, absolutely.
Yeah.
If it has never been approved by the municipality, it is not legal non-conforming.
It's not legal.
It's just illegal.
It's illegal.
Yeah, if they're living in something that has not been approved.
Mhm.
They're living in an illegal dwelling.
That's right.
So you're saying somebody 20 years ago that's living permanently. And they applied to put their parents in it. You're gonna say no.
They applied to put their.
Is that like a garden suite?
No, they've been living permanently in a house for 20 years.
Without-
An attached
And
ADU
they wanna
on the
put,
cottage.
because it's a permanent home.
Not if it's, as Jason said, being legally recognized as such.
Yeah, it has to at some point be legally recognized as a home, or else somebody could be living in a shed and apply for an ADU, and then we'd be like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can have an ADU, like that's.
Put a smaller shed.
Within
That's
any zone which does not permit a permanent dwelling, this could apply to a whole bunch of people.
Yep,
So you,
But we're really
You've
trying to
exploded.
focus it on the commercial and the industrial lands, right?
well, then
So
why
if there's,
why don't you put
if
that?
there's a legal, because there's a number of different zones within that.
Yeah.
But essentially, if we don't allow a permanent dwelling, you can't have an accessory to a dwelling if there's no dwelling.
No, but you already know they probably pay taxes as a permanent.
Not necessarily.
And so all this, they can't, they wanna put their parent in it.
at no point would the municipality allow something that has been illegal for 20 years to all of a sudden be legal. Unless it actually goes through the appropriate steps to get a permit, pass inspection, do all that, then absolutely, we work with somebody. If they're in a structure that ultimately passes all of the inspections they need to pass, we wouldn't be asking them to tear it down if they've been living in there.
Mhm.
I would hope. I mean, we have the ability to and the authority to, but I would hope that as a municipality, we're gonna work with them to say, bring your house to compliance if it's not already.
Mhm.
And then we will get you all the right paperwork. Ensure that you're assessed with MPAC and I'll do all of that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, you can have an ADU for sure.
Mhm.
But if they're living in something that has never complied and will never comply. No, they can't have an ADU for sure.
Mhm. It was just within any zones which does not permit a permanent dwelling. So I was just wondering what's defined as a permanent dwelling, so nobody with a cottage, a seasonal is not gonna apply.
No.
Right,
That's
Yeah.
correct.
It's just when I saw that word. it
right.
didn't know
Yeah,
what
I appreciate it. I'm glad
What
glad
you
we had the
meant
opportunity to
by a
clarify it for
permit.
sure.
And initially, let's not forget, when the recreational zone was first created, going back, they were only intended to be cottages.
Mhm.
It's only been over the years that some people have had them recognized legally as permanent dwellings, but that wasn't the intent of allowing development originally on these lake frontages.
Mhm. Or they're in grandfather, whatever.
Never grandfathered. They definitely have hoops that they have to go through to make sure that they meet building codes and all of that kind of stuff, that they're living safely. For sure. If it's never been legal before, for sure, they have to make sure it's safe.
Okay. And is that the only area with ADU?
I think those are the only changes, yeah.
Section, yeah. It was,
Okay, we just cognizant of time, I'm gonna look to the committee members if I have a mover and a seconder. The motion will be that the planning advisory committee recommend the draft bylaw as amended to council for consideration.
Can I ask one more question? How are we posting this? Like, where does it go from here?
The exact same process, though, it has to go to council first, then it gets, so it'll get posted, then it'll. If we pass it tonight, it's gonna be even that much more public, because it's gonna come to the town hall.
Well, it's gonna come on site for the next meeting?
Yes.
Like with
If
the,
council will be considering.
Yeah,
this
same
draft
as like we
bylaw.
talked about at the top of the
yeah,
meeting.
Yeah, yeah,
sorry,
that's okay. You have a mover and a move by member Poisey, seconded by member Paquette. That the planning advisory committee recommend the draft zoning bylaw as amended to council for consideration. All in favor? It's carried.
oh, just a minute. We
We-
we didn't,
we have one, because.
we said permitted? residential, we didn't go to this one,
Well,
section 4.4.
I think at this point, that is the committee confident to trust staff that they will make any amendments required to ensure that it is meeting the general nature thereof from what we are looking to achieve?
Yeah, we're
Major
still
things.
proposing to remove garden suites, and secondary. Yeah, so that would be. I think
But
that's,
we're allowing one ADU, so it's the same as a secondary dwelling.
yeah,
Okay. I am going to look for a mover and a seconder to adjourn the
Yeah.
meeting. Moved by. Member Roblinski, thank you. Seconded by.
We all looked at it.
That this meeting be adjourned at 6:45 PM. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cam. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.